So, our introductory talk to this series, Pastoral Principles for Living Well Together in Body, Mind and Spirit. Imagine a member of your family or a dear friend meets our church family, these people around you today, or those that you meet regularly in your life group, or just a bunch of you that are at a cafe together, and this family member or friend is gay, lesbian or disabled and moves awkwardly, or perhaps they're loud or is neurodivergent in some way. They have autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, that sort of family of stuff, or is the blackest person you know, or is, worst of all, vegan. I did a little bit of that. I'm vegetarian now, but I had a little bit of vegan. Maybe one day that whole thing will come. It ought to for me. But imagine the welcome, the looks, the hospitality that you'd like that person to receive. Maybe they're searching for meaning or God, or they're wrestling with their identity, their sexuality, their gender. Maybe they are lonely. Maybe their self-esteem is at rock bottom. Perhaps they just want to sit with somebody, anybody, and be listened to without being judged or insulted or ignored. So imagine that member of your family or dear friend meets our church family, these people here today, the ones that you meet within your life group, wherever. What would you like to happen? How would we want that person to go away feeling? Imagine them going away annoyed, never to return again. Why would that have been? Or imagine them going away surprised and uplifted, wanting to come back again. Why would that have been? In all the stories we've been sharing over past years, previous years, particularly during this COVID time, we thought about Jesus mixing with all sorts of people. We imagine Jesus calling us to be with others like he has been and is with others. He often spent his time amongst those who experience prejudice, insult, ridicule, marginalisation, abuse and even violence. And we may at times be amongst such people because they are black or brown-skinned or gay or lesbian or transgender or disabled, etc., etc., in some way other than us. In some way perhaps a stranger to us. Jesus, God's Son, here in human flesh, is the most welcoming and hospitable person on the planet, we seem to hear. He's indiscriminate in his love, his compassion, his care, his welcome of all people, and his hospitality to everybody that he meets. And I don't just mean hospitality here in terms of giving somebody some food and drink. I mean in listening to people. He provided a space for them to discover more of who they were, to discover a love that they'd not experienced. He dignified people that others cast aside, and it got him into trouble. And so it doesn't seem too great a step of thinking to consider how we, the baptized followers of Jesus, are somehow to inhabit the life that he inhabits, to somehow to be like him when we're with people like he met. That we would want to, as it were, replicate his behaviour and demonstrate that welcome, that hospitality. So that's what this series is all about, on Sundays and in our life groups and anywhere else we choose to discuss these things over the weeks to come. It's not so much about us commenting on somebody else's life experience or lifestyle, as it is about us being the kind of people who say, hello, you're welcome, and then following up the welcome with something else. So along the way, we may become the most welcoming and hospitable people on the planet. Or at least here in Cleeve and Woodmancote, in our villages, in our schools and our businesses, in our streets and shops. On a Malvern Church website front page, I read the other day, this is part of their welcome, whether you're an addict, monk, gay, trans, straight, lonely, depressed, sick, healthy, happy, married, divorced, single, old, young, poor or rich, a great welcome to you. Now, at some point when you're with some other people, maybe from here or your life group or whoever, say, what do you think about that welcome? I mean, it'd be hard for us to disagree with any of that, wouldn't it? But do you know what? I wonder how many of us think, oh, we kind of agree with it, but it's not the sort of thing we want splashed all over the place at St. Michael's, is it really? Words like that. I mean, what would people think? Yes. What would they think? Anyway, just to say, I haven't got any plans to put a big banner outside at the moment, but this will be part of our discussion. What does it mean to be the most welcoming and hospitable people in the name of Jesus on this planet? And to not be afraid to say so. So that's what this series of talks and life group materials is all about. It's about this pastoral principles that will invite us to think further and more deeply about what it means for us to behave like Jesus. And along the way, the idea is that we overcome, or we at least address, some of the kind of behaviours that we can display that sometimes diminish and put barriers up in our relations with other people that we might consider that are different from us. Some of those behaviours are our prejudices, our silence when we ought to speak and we remain silent, our ignorance, our fear, our hypocrisy. These behaviours hinder our growth as Christians and hurt other people, and as I say, create all these barriers between us. They are the opposite of the fruit of the Spirit. Of course, it's easy to see these behaviours in others, isn't it? And it's harder to see them in ourselves. So at times these Sundays and the course material will have a focus on people within the LGBTQ plus community. Those letters can sometimes get us in a mix. Do we put them all in there? Do we know what they all mean? Well, I'm going to let you go away and do a bit more research on that, although I'll mention a couple of them as we go, I'm sure. But these pastoral principles of living well together in body, mind and spirit are just that. They are biblical principles to help us be a church family who are the most open, welcoming and hospitable people on the planet. Now, of course, let me just say, we are already very friendly and welcoming, I hear you say. That's true. But we could ask a question to help us go deeper, and this question is this: who's not here? Who isn't represented here? Okay, so as we go a little bit further into this, I recognise that right now you'll be feeling a whole load of different things. The response to, oh, we're doing this stuff, are we? Can I just say, we're not getting some of the real meat of these subjects till maybe in the new year. What we're trying to do now is create the environment through discussing these pastoral principles where we can have sensible, loving conversations together. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. But anyway, your responses might be like some of the PCC, not all, but most of the PCC, when we talked about this and discussed it a bit at our last meeting, we're kind of at last, about time. This is appropriate for us to do this. Can I just say, I'm not going to be delivering a message on high during this series, or at the end of it, looking to wrap it up with a nicely labelled paragraph that I personally deliver to each of you that is headlined, "Here are all the answers." There's going to be a shed load of questions and discussion as we go through these things over the weeks to come. Now, the fact that I'm not going to do that may disappoint some of you because you're looking for answers. You want, what does the church think? What does the Church of England say? What does our church say? What does Malk think? What do our leadership team think? But this is not about us, as it were, trying to get to a place where we all agree exactly the same thing. One day that will happen. It may happen. I'm just saying we're going to have a discussion and we're going to see how we go. So some of you may be disappointed about that because you may feel we've got very firm beliefs, well-worn beliefs about what we think about some of these issues and what ought to be said. And some of you may find me saying that I'm not going to do that, is great. That's good. So we're in on a conversation, but we're going to take scripture seriously. We're going to listen to people's stories and we're going to take them seriously. There was a time many decades ago when I really knew I was right about some things. Ever been there? I was right that men and men only should lead the church. Anybody else willing to say that's what they believed? You're going to put, thank you for that hand there. Thank you for that one there. And a few others saying, that's me, but I'm not putting my hand up. Because leadership is about somebody male. All that kind of stuff. And I was there. I wasn't quite in the camp that thought, well, Jesus was male, therefore only he can represent Christ. Only a male priest can represent Christ at the Eucharist. I didn't believe that. I just thought that somehow leadership was male, particularly in the church. Thank God, I hear you say, and I say to myself, I changed my mind. I wonder what you think about that. I realised I thought I was wrong, ridiculously wrong. And yet churches still believe differently about this today, as they do about things like divorce. So I've been talking with friends on and off here and elsewhere for quite a long time on issues of sexuality and relationships. I'm learning all the time. I've listened to radio programmes and podcasts that I would have never listened to before. I've read and continue to read stuff. I've watched films and TV programmes I never would have watched before. All because I knew I was pretty ignorant of the lives of those whose lived experience was that of the LGBTQ plus community. I'm still learning, but I'm definitely more open. And what I mean by that is that my greatest level of concern right now is that people within the LGBTQ plus community, people who are disabled or neurodivergent, again, look at all the things. If you want to see a really good comment on the neurodivergency, pick up on Roby's comment on our Facebook group. Brilliant, thank you, because I've read that. So glad you put that there, Roby. I want all of those people and others that you would think of to have a space and to have the opportunity to explore their identity and calling in life, to make friends, to discover what Christian faith is all about in the loving presence of God who made us all and loves us all, and to do it all without fear. You are an incredible family of people. You have an incredible mix of life experiences, some of which I know. We've laughed together and we've cried together in the years gone by, and particularly over this last year and a half or more, we've wrestled together with our faith. Some of us, our faith has got stronger. For some of us, our faith has got weaker. And we're all going to have our own ideas and views and life experiences that we're going to bring to these next few weeks. Thank you for what you're going to bring to the discussions. It may be that there are people very close to you who are part of the whole LGBTQ plus realm, who you may feel you can never mention to your Christian friends for fear of what they might say. We may have wrestled with our own sexuality in the past, or maybe now. We may be fearful of these subjects. We may feel they're irrelevant to us as an individual. It just hasn't crossed our path. A bit like racism might not seem really relevant if we don't know any black or brown people or never see any. But do you know what? We as church family are in this together. So in spite of our personal life experiences, our personal views, and whether we've wrestled with these subjects at all ourselves, we are in this together. We want together to share the love of Christ with those who don't yet name themselves as Christians. So, that's by way of introduction, and I'm sure I'm going to mention some of that introductory stuff as we go. Not everyone would have been here this Sunday either, so I might just mention a couple of those things next time as well. But let's move on to principle 1, which is to listen well to others who are different from us. It will help us address our ignorance and some of our fears when we do that. Listening well to others does take humility and courage, but listening well to another dignifies them. It shows that they and their story matter. You know that I've said before that I quite, I'm just thinking right now in my head, what do I think about tattoos? Sorry, my mind went all over the place just in those moments. I changed my mind about tattoos, not in terms of, I'm going to get one personally, I haven't yet, but maybe, who knows. But in terms of thinking they're the most horrible, disgusting things, how could everybody put anything on that body and seeing all those, putting those things? And I just changed my kind of way I was going to view people with tattoos. So now you're far more likely to hear me ask someone to tell me the story of their tattoos than just to roll my eyes. And I tell you, when I ask somebody about their tattoos, it's almost like most of the time their face lights up because somebody is interested and they'll tell me the story of why that's there. Bishop, I think it's J.V. Taylor's son, on leaving church many decades ago, said, that man, they're in church, that man at the front, he was a man, is saying all the right things, but saying them to no one in particular. He has no idea where I am, and it wouldn't even occur to him to ask. He has no idea where I am, and it wouldn't even occur to him to ask. I was going to write out some quotes from this fantastic book by Henri Nouwen called Reaching Out. It's a real classic of his. It's a book I turn to often over the years. I'm going to read a couple of bits out from this book, which kind of just tune in with this kind of thing of us being open to others. So he says, in our world full of strangers, estranged from their own past, culture and country, from their neighbours, from their friends and family, from their deepest self and their God, we witness, this is the bit, a painful search for a hospitable place where life can be lived without fear and where community can be found. You come across people you think that might be after that sort of thing? He says also, the term hospitality should not be limited to its literal sense of receiving a stranger into our house, although it is important never to forget or neglect that. But as, here we are, a fundamental attitude towards our fellow human being, which can be expressed in a great variety of ways. Hospitality, therefore, means primarily the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them a space where change can take place. I love that. It's not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom not disturbed by dividing lines. It is not to lead our neighbour into a corner where there is no alternatives left, but to open a wide spectrum of options for choice and commitment. It is not an educated intimidation with good books, good stories and good works, but the liberation of fearful hearts so that words can find roots and bear ample fruit. It is not a method of making our God and our way into the criteria of happiness, but the opening of an opportunity to others to find God and their way. The paradox of hospitality is that it wants to create emptiness, not a fearful emptiness, but a friendly emptiness where strangers can enter and discover themselves as created free to sing their own songs, speak their own languages, dance their own dances, free to be able to leave and follow their own vocation. Hospitality is not a subtle invitation to adopt the lifestyle of the host, but a gift of a chance for the guest to find their own. And lastly, at the end of this bit of the chapter, he says, just as we cannot force a plant to grow, but can take away the weeds and stones which prevent its development, so we cannot force anyone to such a personal and intimate change of heart, but we can offer the space where such a change can take place. Now, I'm conscious, reading some stuff there about change, you might be saying, well, what sort of change are we taking? I want to interpret it as a change that happens when someone meets Jesus in the depths of their heart and their soul. and the transformation that they may make to that whole of their life in a whole shed load of ways. So principle one is to listen well to others who are different from us. So do listen to stories. There are plenty of them out there. I'm still struck by the story, I think it was 2019, the shocking case of Melania and her girlfriend Chris, who were taunted and insulted and beaten on a London bus in 2019. And they came out with that story. You can see them talking about it on the BBC website because they thought, we don't want to hide away. And it seems to me that no matter what we might think about a girl having a girlfriend, none of us would want to see people treated like that. So there's something here about offering that welcome, that space where people can... So it's about us listening to those sorts of stories in all sorts of different ways. And maybe we've never done that before. Listen to the stories of black and brown people, of disabled people, all sorts of people. And we can ask, what's this person felt? And what are they feeling? There are umpteen amounts of podcasts and radio programs out there. Read a different kind of book. Read a Christian book that maybe comes from a different angle from the kind of place where you sit at the moment. I can recommend something if you want. It takes courage to read a different version that covers maybe the Bible and says things. But it's about listening. Watch films. One of the best I watched was one called Boy Erased. Anybody seen that film? It's got two of your favourite actors in it, Russell Crowe and Nicole Kidman. It's on BBC at the moment for free. It's a Christian couple, Christian family. He's a pastor. Their son tells them that he is gay. And then it's about what they seek to do next to change him. It's based on a true story. It's a really good film. So what will be the result of all this listening and searching out? Well, we'll receive the gift of somebody else's story. We'll hear something of somebody else's life experience, their feelings, which may include fear, guilt and shame over how they have been made to feel because of who they are. Some may feel broken because of how others have treated them. And what should that lead us towards? Surely we who name ourselves as believers in and followers of Jesus will be drawn towards them in compassion. Jesus saw brokenness in people and was full of love and compassion and action. And I'm not saying here that all the people that I've mentioned are somehow broken. That's not what I'm saying. The church and society have spent many, many decades raining down judgment on the heads of gay people for years, giving them the impression that they are broken, defective, defiled, failed, deviant, sinful, sick. It's often been the church community that should be ashamed of the way we have treated women, black people, brown people, LGBTQ plus folk as well. So let me wrap this up with some comments finally from that scripture that we read together. Some highlights from that if you like, which I encourage you to be thinking about. We heard the words, be inventive in hospitality, practice and pursue it. We heard the words, be mindful of another's worth as you are your own. We heard the words, discover beauty in everyone. We heard those words then, be inventive in hospitality. The idea is that we are to practice hospitality. The Greek word there means to press or pursue, not just to sit back and let people come to us, but to practice, to pursue it, to intentionally strive to embrace strangers and needy individuals. Be as mindful of another's worth as you are your own. Discover beauty in everyone. So as I conclude your homework, okay? I encourage us to reflect personally. What do I want to get out of all this series? Or if we dare to ask ourselves, what do I need to get from God out of this series? So reflect. Secondly, we can acknowledge. We can acknowledge our ignorance like I did about a whole shed load of these issues and my need to learn. Reflect, acknowledge, listen, of encourage to a different story, and act. How might God lead you and me together and as individuals to someone who's different from us, and by having a conversation with them, show them dignity, give them the gift of their humanity, and be a blessing to them. Ages ago, when I was wrestling with some of these topics, I scribbled down a prayer that came to me, which I'm going to read now as I conclude. Lord, grow my love for the people you love. Help me to love them like you love them. Set me free from pride and prejudice, fear and worry, judgment of others. Help me to love the people you love and to include all who you include. Amen.